My mother abandoned me at 6 months old and had 3 more kids. She was mother of the year with them, but never with me. Now that I'm successful and engaged, they come crawling back. But what I told them in front of the whole family left them shattered. I'm 27 years old. I work in digital marketing, and I'm engaged to the love of my life, Lucas. But there's something I need to talk about because what happened a few weeks ago still has me processing a lot of emotions that I thought I'd left behind years ago. I guess I should start at the beginning, though the beginning is actually a void for me, because I don't remember anything from when my mom, Rachel, left me. I was like 6 months old when she decided that being a mother wasn't her thing and basically disappeared from my life, leaving me with my dad, Stephen, who had to become father and mother overnight. My dad never talked badly about her when I was a kid, which looking back must have killed him inside, but he always said that I deserved to form my own opinion when I was older. Though the truth is that Rachel took care all by herself of making my opinion of her shit. I grew up with my dad in a small apartment, nothing fancy but always clean and comfortable, and he worked in construction, long shifts that left him destroyed, but never, and when I say never, I mean never, did he make me feel like I was a burden or that his life would have been better without me. He'd take me to his softball games on weekends. He'd help me with homework even though math wasn't his strong suit. You remember we'd stay up until 11 at night trying to understand fractions, and he was always there for everything I needed. The thing is that Rachel technically had court-ordered visitation rights, like every other weekend or something like that, but she almost never showed up. My dad would pack me a small backpack with my things. I'd put on my favorite clothes because in my kid brain, I thought that maybe if I looked good, she'd want to spend time with me, and we'd sit and wait in the living room. And she just wouldn't show up. Not a call, not a message, nothing. My dad would try to hide his anger and say things like, she probably had an emergency, or maybe the traffic is terrible. But I could see he was furious. Not at me, obviously, but at her. For doing that to me again and again and again. And what I do remember vividly is that Rachel went to jail twice for not paying the child support. The court had ordered her to pay. And I'm not talking about ridiculous amounts. It was like $200 a month. Something that anyone with a part-time job could pay. But she didn't even make the effort. My dad never used that money for himself. He put it in a savings account for my college. He told me when I was like 12. But the point is that she didn't pay because she didn't care. Plain and simple. When I was 6 years old, Rachel met Greg. They got married super fast. Like in less than a year, they were already living together and planning a wedding. And they had 3 kids in the following years. One after another. Bam, bam, bam. And that's where things got weirder. Because suddenly, Rachel could be a mother, she could change diapers and go to school recitals and do all those mom things, just not with me, with her other kids, my half-siblings. Technically, though, I never felt them as such because we basically grew up in completely different worlds. Greg tried. I guess you have to give him credit for that. To get into my life as if he were my dad. And the first big incident I remember was when I was 10 years old and there was a Father's Day event at my school. My dad had requested the day off weeks in advance because these events were super important to him, and I was excited because we were going to do an activity building things with wood, and my dad was literally an expert at that. But it turns out my dad had an emergency at work, a broken pipe in a new building or something like that, and he couldn't get there until half an hour before the event ended. And when he arrived, I was sitting there with Greg. Rachel had called the school and sent Greg without even asking me if I wanted him to be there. And when my dad arrived and saw me with Greg, building this shitty wooden house, I literally saw his heart break into pieces. He didn't say anything at that moment because he didn't want to make a scene, but in the car on the way home he apologized like 1,000 times, and I told him it wasn't his fault, that Greg wasn't my dad and never would be, and I think that made him feel a little better, but also worse at the same time. You know what I mean? Years went by, and I basically avoided all contact with Rachel and Greg, except for some mandatory family gatherings, where I was like the ghost child. I was there physically, but nobody really talked to me or included me in conversations. My half-siblings were good kids. Honestly, it wasn't their fault that their mom was a disaster as a mother to me. But we didn't have a close relationship either because Rachel never encouraged that. She never brought us together or organized things for us to get to know each other better. And then what changed everything forever happened. When I was 14 years old, my dad died of a heart attack. It was super sudden. Like he was fine one day, and the next he collapsed at work, and by the time the ambulance arrived, it was already too late. I remember that day perfectly. They pulled me out of class. There was a social worker waiting for me in the principal's office, and when they told me what had happened, I just didn't process it. My brain refused to accept that my dad, my rock, the only person who had always been there for me, was gone just like that suddenly. The funeral was horrible. Obviously, all those funerals are horrible. But this one was especially bad because there was Rachel, crying and acting like she had lost the love of her life, when she had literally abandoned him and me years ago. And Greg, oh Greg, came up to me after the service with that fake compassionate face and told me that they had an extra room in their house, that I could go live with them, that he was going to take care of me as if I were his own son. And I, at 14 years old, devastated, angry, lost, looked him straight in the eyes and told him that I'd rather live on the street than with them. I said it out loud. Several people heard, and Rachel's face was pure humiliation. But honestly, at that moment, I didn't care. What happened next was that my dad's brothers, my uncles Eric and Jason, an incredible gay couple who had always been part of my life, offered to adopt me legally, and I accepted without thinking twice because they were real family. They had been present in my life, at every birthday, at every soccer game, at every important moment. I lived with Eric and Jason from 14 to 18, and then I went to college, and honestly, those years were what saved me, because they gave me structure, love, and a real home where I wasn't an obligation but someone loved. During all that time, Greg tried to contact me multiple times. He'd send me messages on Facebook. This was like in 2012 or 2013, when Facebook was still prior, the main social network. He'd write me long emails talking about how he wanted to be part of my life, about how Rachel regretted everything and wanted a second chance. I blocked his Facebook after the 5th message, marked his emails as spam, and basically deleted any form of contact he had with me. Rachel never contacted me directly. She always sent Greg to do the dirty work, which was typical of her. She never had the courage to face the consequences of her actions. Years went by. I graduated from college, got a good job, met Lucas, who was literally the love of my life, and proposed to me 6 months ago. And I was in a really good place mentally. I had done therapy. I had processed my dad's death and Rachel's abandonment, and I thought that chapter of my life was closed. But then, like 2 months ago, I went to a birthday party for one of my cousins on my dad's side, a big family gathering where there was going to be a bunch of people I hadn't seen in years. And, of course, Rachel and Fernicht. Greg were there because, technically, they were still part of the extended family in some twisted way. I tried to avoid them all night. I stayed on the other side of the yard, talking with my uncles and other cousins. But Greg approached me while I was alone for a moment, getting a beer from the cooler. He put his hand on my shoulder, that fake father gesture, and told me he had heard about my engagement, that he was happy for me, and that he hoped I would consider him to walk me down the aisle on my wedding day. And when I say I froze, I literally stood there with the beer in my hand, unable to process what I had just heard. This guy, who had been absent from my life except for pathetic attempts to play dad from time to time, wanted to walk me down the aisle on the most important day of my life? I told him, pretty calmly, considering the rage I felt inside, that position was for my Uncle Eric, who had literally raised me since I was 14, and that there was no way in. The world that he, Greg, would have that honor. And he had the nerve, to say that Eric wasn't really my family, that he had been married to my mom for over 20 years, that he had tried to be there for me, and that I should give him a chance. Something inside me broke at that moment, or rather something I had been containing for years, finally exploded. And I told him in front of several people who were nearby that he was nothing to me, that Rachel had abandoned me, and that she had chosen to be a mother to her other 3 children, but not to me, that neither of them had the right to show up now that my life was going well and pretend we were a happy family. I told him that my dad, Stephen, had been my only true father, that he had worked himself to exhaustion to give me a good life, that he had never made me feel less or abandoned, and that Greg could never fill those shoes even if he lived 1,000 years. Yelled everything I had kept for years. How she had gone to jail twice instead of paying child support to her own child. How she had had 3 more children and had been a decent mother to them but never to me. How she had left me waiting for her countless times when I was a kid. How she had sent Greg to my school event without my permission. The party got super awkward. Obviously, several relatives tried to calm me down, but I was already in I don't care about anything mode. And Rachel, with tears in her eyes, probably more from embarrassment than real sadness, told me that she had been young when she had me, that she wasn't ready, that she had made mistakes, but that now it was different. And I told her it was too late, that mistakes are forgiven, but systematic abandonment and neglect for years are not. That she had had thousands of opportunities to be my mother and had chosen not to be, and that I didn't owe her anything. Not forgiveness or a relationship or even basic respect. I left the party after that. Lucas caught up with me in the parking lot. He had come with me and had witnessed everything from a distance. And he hugged me while I trembled with rage and adrenaline in the car. I thought that would be the end of it. That I had finally made it clear that I didn't want anything to do with them. But 2 days later, Rachel called me from a number I didn't have blocked, probably from some friend or something, and started yelling at me about how I had humiliated her in front of the whole family, about how I had no right to talk to her like that, about how she was my mother and deserved respect. I listened to her for like 30 seconds before simply hanging up, and I blocked that number too. But it didn't end there, because literally a week ago, Greg showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he got my address, but I assume some well-intentioned relative gave it to him thinking they were helping, and he knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. I opened, thinking it was a delivery or something, and there he was with that determined face, saying we needed to talk, that this couldn't continue like this, that I needed to let go of the past and accept them as family. I told him to leave, that he wasn't welcome there, but he tried to stick his foot in the door, literally like in the movies, saying he wasn't leaving until I listened to him. And I, honestly, felt a mixture of fear and rage, because this guy was basically forcing himself into my space, into my home, the place where I'm supposed to feel safe. I yelled at him that he had 10 seconds to get away from my door before I called the police, and he tried to reason with me, saying that Rachel was depressed, that my half-siblings wanted to get to know me better, that he just wanted what was best for me. I told him that what was best for me was for him and Rachel to disappear from my life permanently, that I already had a family that truly loved me, that I didn't need their charity or guilt, and that if he showed up at my door again or tried to contact me in any way, I was going to get a restraining order. I closed the door in his face, literally, and I heard him stand there for a few minutes before finally leaving. Lucas was with me that day. He had gone to buy coffee, and when he came back, I was trembling on the couch, not exactly from fear, but from that post-confrontation adrenaline that leaves you exhausted. He made me tea, hugged me, and reminded me that I had every right to set boundaries and protect my mental peace. That nobody, not even people who share your blood, has the right to force themselves into your life if you don't want them to. I blocked all of Rachel and Greg's numbers that I had. I told my extended family not to share my information with them under any circumstances, and basically closed that door forever. Some relatives have told me I'm being too harsh, that Rachel is my mother after all, that I should forgive and forget. But honestly, those people don't understand what it's like to grow up feeling unwanted by one of the people who is supposed to love you unconditionally. My dad, Stephen, loved me unconditionally. My uncles, Eric and Jason, love me unconditionally. Lucas loves me unconditionally. That's my family. Rachel had 18 years to be my mother and chose not to be. Greg had years to respect my boundaries and chose to repeatedly ignore them. I don't owe them anything. Not my time, not my energy, not a place at my wedding, not a forced relationship out of social obligation. And what bothers me most, honestly, is that they act like I'm the bad guy in the story. Like I'm irrational for not wanting a relationship with people who literally abandoned me and ignored me for most of my life. It's like they expect me to just forget everything that happened because now it's convenient for them to have a relationship, and that's not how it works. I'm planning my wedding with Lucas. My uncle Eric is going to walk me down the place's aisle. My uncles are going to be in the front row. My close friends are going to be part of the ceremony, and Rachel and Greg are not going to be there, period. I'm not going to have that day stained by their presence or by the drama they would inevitably bring. I've worked too hard in therapy. I've rebuilt too much of myself after years of feeling rejected to let them come back in and destroy my peace. and maybe it sounds selfish or cruel from the outside. But when you live the experience of being the unwanted child, of seeing your mother be an excellent mother to your half-siblings but never to you, you understand that some relationships simply can't be repaired because the damage is too deep. I don't think much about Rachel these days, honestly. Sometimes I wonder if my half-siblings are okay, if they're happy, but not enough to reach out to them because that would mean opening a door. I've worked very hard to keep closed. My life now is good, really good, and I don't need the validation or love from someone who decided 27 years ago that I wasn't worth their time. I guess that's it.